I'm a firefighter who survived the first 12 hours of the zombie outbreak, and I can still pinpoint the exact moment my world flipped upside down. It all kicked off around dawn, a time when the day should have been nothing more than routine. We were at the station, bleary-eyed and half awake, winding down from a quiet night shift. My crew and I sprawled around the big oak table in the kitchen, cradling mugs of lukewarm coffee, tossing around dumb jokes to shake off the early morning haze. It was one of those crisp, cool mornings where the air feels sharp against your skin, and you can almost see the hours stretching out ahead. Simple, predictable, uneventful. The station was our little island of normalcy. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting a soft glow over the worn counters and the stack of breakfast dishes we hadn't bothered to clean yet. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten, a pale gray streaked with the faintest hints of orange. I remember thinking it was going to be an easy shift, maybe a cat stuck in a tree or a kitchen fire from someone forgetting their bacon on the stove. That's how it usually went. Then the phone at the watch desk shrilled, cutting through our lazy chatter like a knife. We all perked up, heads swiveling toward the sound. The duty officer, a gruff guy named Hank, picked it up, his voice low and steady as he muttered, "Yeah, got it. Possible fire at an old shop. Some weird activity reported." That was all we got. Just a vague heads up, the kind of call that barely raises an eyebrow. Abandoned buildings were usually straightforward. Kids messing around, a hobo's campfire gone rogue, or sometimes just a prank. Nothing about Hank's tone suggested we were about to step into a nightmare. I was on the first team out the door. The familiar rush hit me like a shot of adrenaline straight to the chest as I yanked on my turnout gear. The heavy jacket smelled of smoke and sweat, a comforting weight as I hefted the oxygen tank onto my back and bolted for the engine. My partner, Jake, slid into the driver's seat beside me, flashing that cocky grin he always wore before a call. "Buckle up, Sam," he said, his voice light, almost teasing. "Here we go again." I tried to match his vibe, forcing a smirk, but something felt off. I couldn't name it then, just a prickling unease, like static crawling under my skin. Maybe it was the way the sky hung too heavy, too dull, or the unnatural quiet clinging to the streets as we peeled out of the bay. Whatever it was, it gnawed at me, a whisper I couldn't shake. The engine roared through the city, siren blaring, cutting through the stillness of the early hour. The streets were mostly empty, shops still shuttered, their windows dark and lifeless. The few people we passed looked jittery, out of place. An old man stood on his porch, arms crossed, staring into the distance like he was waiting for bad news. A woman hurried along the sidewalk, head whipping side to side, as if she expected something to leap out from the shadows. Jake caught my eye in the rearview mirror, one eyebrow raised, but neither of us said a word. We chalked it up to the neighborhood being spooked by the fire report. People get weird when they smell smoke. We pulled up to the address, an old, sagging two-story storefront on a street that time had forgotten. Wisps of smoke curled out of the shattered second-floor windows, thin and lazy, not the thick plumes you'd expect from a real inferno. It looked more like something was smoldering up there, a slow burn rather than a blaze. Our station chief, Captain Torres, hopped out first, his flashlight slicing through the dimness as he scanned the scene. "Gear up, stay sharp," he barked, voice steady but firm. Two others, Nadia and Marcus, fell in behind him, hauling axes and extinguishers. I brought up the rear, my boots crunching on broken glass as we stepped inside. The air hit us like a wall, stale, heavy, thick with dust and neglect. It felt like the building had been sealed shut for decades, the kind of place where even the sunlight didn't dare linger. The walls were a mess of peeling paint, streaked with grime, and the floor groaned under our weight, splintered boards sagging with every step. We moved slow, deliberate, calling out into the gloom. "Fire department. Anyone in here?" I half expected a raccoon to skitter out or some strung-out squatter to stumble into view. What I didn't expect was the shape we found lurking near the stairwell. It was a person, or at least, it looked like one at first. They were slumped against the wall, clothes ragged and streaked with ash, their face shadowed in the dim light. Their eyes caught me off guard, dull, empty, like they were staring through us instead of at us. Captain Torres raised a hand to hold us back, stepping forward with that calm authority he always carried. "Hey, you okay? We're here to help," he said, reaching out to steady them. That's when everything went to hell. In a blink, the figure jerked upright, arms snapping out to claw at Torres's jacket. It was so fast, so sudden, that the captain staggered back, crashing into Marcus and nearly taking them both down. The person moved like they were possessed, wild, desperate, driven by something I couldn't wrap my head around. Even in the murky light, I saw their face. Pale, slick with sweat, eyes wide and unblinking. They looked sick, deathly sick, but not weak. Nadia, who dealt with her share of crazed folks on calls, jumped in, voice steady as she tried to de-escalate. Hey, calm down. We're not here to hurt you." She waved her hand slow and easy, like you'd soothe a spooked animal. But the figure didn't even flinch at her words, just kept lurching forward, unsteady but relentless. Jake fumbled his flashlight in the chaos, the beam spinning crazy patterns across the walls. Torres recovered fast, shoving the person back with a controlled push. Not hard, just enough to break their grip. "We need medics," he muttered, sounding more confused than rattled. We still thought we were dealing with someone high or hurt, maybe disoriented from the smoke. None of us had a clue this was the spark of something bigger, something that'd swallow the whole damn city. We pressed deeper into the building, stepping over piles of junk, broken chairs, moldy cardboard, shards of glass. Upstairs, the smoke thickened, but it wasn't a full-on fire. Small flames flickered in one room, patchy and weak, like someone had tried to burn a pile of trash and given up halfway. We moved in to knock it out, falling back on the muscle memory of a standard call. At least that part made sense, something we could handle while the world started tilting off its axis. Then we hit the storage room. It was bigger, cavernous, the kind of space that swallowed sound. And it wasn't empty. 4 or 5 figures stood there, swaying slightly, their heads snapping toward us as we stepped in. Their clothes were filthy, some stained dark with what might have been blood. Their eyes locked on us, sharp and hungry, like we were the only thing in the room that mattered. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. People trapped in a fire scream. They wave, they beg for help. These didn't. They just stared, then started moving, slow, dragging steps, closing in like a pack. "Everyone out of here now," Torres shouted, voice booming off the walls. "Follow my lead." Calm and quick. But they didn't listen to his commands either. One stumbled over a crate and scrambled back up, unfazed. Marcus tried to herd them toward the door, gloved hand outstretched, but 2 of them lunged, fast, feral, grabbing for his arm. I froze for a split second, brain scrambling to catch up. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. Jake grabbed my shoulder, yanking me toward the exit. "Sam, move. We're leaving," he yelled, pointing to the hallway. More shapes shuffled in from the shadows. Too many, too close. My heart slammed against my ribs as we backed down the stairs, Torres barking orders. "Tight line. Don't let him box you in." The first figure we'd seen was still at the bottom, blocking the way. Jake tried to nudge them aside, gentle but firm, but they thrashed, clawing at his sleeve. Nadia had to pry them off, her face tight with disbelief. By the time we spilled out onto the street, the world outside had changed too. A dozen more of them roamed the road, pale, shambling, their blank stares turning toward us. The radio crackled with panicked chatter, words like outbreak, and they're everywhere, slicing through the static. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just a bad call. This was the beginning of the end. The street outside that crumbling storefront was a different beast from the one we'd rolled up to just minutes ago. Those shambling figures, people, or what used to be people, dotted the pavement, their heads swiveling toward us like we'd rung a dinner bell. My crew and I stood there, breathless, gear still slung over our shoulders, staring at a scene that didn't compute. Captain Torres gripped the radio, his voice cutting through the haze of shock. "Dispatch, we've got a situation, multiple civilians, erratic behavior. Send backup, medical, anything." Static spat back at him, laced with garbled shouts, fragments of "Bao Dong," riot, not responding, and "stay put." My gut twisted. Whatever this was, it wasn't just our problem anymore. The engine sat 30 yards away, a hulking red lifeline in the gray dawn. 30 yards doesn't sound like much, half a football field, a quick sprint, but with those things closing in, it might as well have been a mile. They moved slow at first, unsteady, like drunks staggering out of a bar at closing time. But their eyes, those hollow, unblinking stares, locked on us with a purpose that made my skin crawl. Jake, always the first to act, bolted for the driver's seat, keys jangling in his fist. "I'll get her running," he yelled over his shoulder. The rest of us tightened up, a ragged line of yellow coats against a tide of pale faces. That's when we heard it, a scream, raw and desperate, slicing through the quiet. "Help! Somebody please!" A guy came tearing around the corner, legs pumping, his face a mask of terror. Behind him, a pack of those things, 10, maybe 12, lurched in pursuit, their arms outstretched like they were reaching for something they couldn't quite name. He spotted us, our uniforms a beacon in the chaos, and veered our way, chest heaving. Torres didn't hesitate. "Jake, engine now. Everyone else, clear a path for him." We fanned out, trying to give the guy a shot at safety. I stepped forward, heart thudding, my fire axe gripped tight. Not to swing, not yet, but as a shield, something solid between me and whatever this was. The runner stumbled, just feet from me, his sneakers skidding on the asphalt. I lunged, grabbed his arm, and hauled him upright, his sweat-soaked shirt sticking to my glove. "Move, move," I barked, practically dragging him toward the engine. He was shaking so hard I could feel it through my gear, his wide eyes darting back to the pack closing in. Nadia and Marcus flanked us, shouting warnings at the figures. "Stay back. We're here to help." But it was like yelling at a brick wall. One of them, a woman in a torn sweater, lunged at Nadia, hands clawing the air. Nadia shoved her off with a grunt, the woman tumbling back, but barely registering the hit. Another grabbed for Marcus's sleeve, fingers curling around the fabric until he yanked free, swearing under his breath. These weren't people panicking in a fire. Their movements were wrong, too jerky, too relentless. My brain screamed disease, drugs, something, but nothing fit. "Everybody in." Torres roared, voice like thunder. Jake had the engine growling, door flung open, and we piled in. The runner first, then me, Nadia, Marcus, Torres last. The guy collapsed onto the bench seat, gasping, his hands clawing at his knees like he could hold himself together. I slammed the door shut just as fists started thumping against the metal, dull smacks that echoed inside the cab. Smudged faces pressed against the windows, leaving greasy streaks, their blank stares boring into us. Jake floored it, the engine lurching forward with a groan, and those things pounded the sides, some stumbling after us like they thought they could keep up. We left them in the dust, but the image stuck. Those hands, those eyes, burned into my skull. The city blurred past us, a warped version of the place I'd sworn to protect. Smoke curled up from random corners, small fires, maybe, or accidents gone unchecked. Sirens wailed in the distance, a chorus of emergencies overlapping into a single, endless drone. We passed a corner store, its front window shattered, shelves tipped over inside. Shadows moved behind the flickering lights, more of those things, knocking cans and boxes to the floor. A car peeled out nearby, tires squealing, two people inside staring straight ahead like they were running for their lives. I wanted to stop, to help, but the weight of what we'd just seen pinned me to my seat. The radio crackled again, louder now, Alvarez's voice breaking through from the station. All units, this is bad. Widespread reports of violence, injuries. Gear up heavy, assume hostiles. It's out of control. The line cut to static before Torres could reply, his jaw tightening as he gripped the mic. Where the hell do we go? Jake asked, eyes glued to the road, weaving around an abandoned sedan with its door hanging open. The runner, still panting beside me, muttered something incoherent, half words about sick and biting. It sent a chill racing down my spine. Biting? Like some horror flick come to life? I didn't want to believe it, but those vacant stares wouldn't leave my head. Back to the station, Torres said, voice low but ironclad. It's secure, doors, walls, power. We regroup, figure this out. No one argued. The station was our rock, a fortress of concrete and steel built to weather storms, literal and otherwise. If anywhere could hold against this madness, it was there. Jake nodded, cranking the wheel, and we barreled toward home base, the engine's rumble a lifeline in the growing dark. The guy we'd saved finally found his voice between ragged breaths. It started last night, he said, staring at his trembling hands. People just changed, got aggressive, like they didn't know anyone anymore. I tried to get out of town, but the roads, crashes, those things everywhere. Some got bitten, and then he trailed off, swallowing hard. Bitten, that word again, sinking claws into my thoughts. I glanced at Nadia. She'd heard it too, her brow furrowing. But none of us pressed him. He looked like he'd break if we did. When we rolled up to the station, relief hit me like a punch. A handful of our people stood outside, Jesse and Paul, two of the toughest firefighters I knew, keeping watch with a few locals who'd shown up seeking shelter. The bay doors were still open, overhead lights blazing, and we slid the engine inside, tires squealing on the polished floor. I hopped out first, helping the runner down, his legs wobbly as he clung to my arm. The air inside buzzed with tension, gear strewn across tables, radios spitting static, people huddled in corners clutching phones that wouldn't connect. Jessie jogged over, her face grim. You see it out there? She asked, voice tight. It's everywhere, calls flooding in, attacks, chaos. Some EMS crews didn't come back. Cops are swamped. Torres nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Caught it firsthand. They're not right. Don't react to pain, just keep coming. Paul chimed in, holding up a radio. Heard quarantine tossed around, but no one's saying who's enforcing it, or if they even can. Torres took charge, rallying us in the bay. This is bigger than any fire we've faced, but our job doesn't change. Protect who we can. First, we lock this place down. Then we figure out how to help. We moved fast, dragging tables and benches to barricade the front doors, piling anything heavy we could find. Through the windows, I caught glimpses of stragglers outside, lone figures or small clusters, shuffling past with that same eerie gait. They didn't bang or shout, just drifted like ghosts hunting something they couldn't name. Inside, we set up a corner for the wounded, minor cuts and bruises mostly, folks who'd stumbled in off the street. The runner sat there now, a blanket around his shoulders, staring blankly at the floor. I kept an eye on him, half expecting him to turn, to sprout those dead eyes. It felt wrong to distrust him. He was a victim, same as us, but fear twists your mind into knots. Around hour 6, the radios finally coughed up something solid. An emergency broadcast, crisp and official. Citizens, remain indoors. Avoid contact with infected individuals. They exhibit erratic behavior, no pain response, and may react to noise. Infected. The word landed like a brick. This was real, a contagion spreading fast. Jake tried calling his sister, got nothing. Nadia dialed her parents, same deal. Marcus paced, muttering about evacuation orders that never came. The tension thickened with every unanswered call, every flicker of movement outside. By hour 7, Torres called us together again. We can't just sit here, he said, eyes hard. People need us out there. We'll run teams, rescue who we can, bring him back. Small, fast, no risks. I volunteered without thinking, Jake and Nadia stepping up beside me. We loaded the truck, med kits, tools, anything to pry open a door or fend off trouble. A local, an older guy named Carl, grabbed my arm as we headed out. My son's place, 2 miles east. Please, check it. His voice cracked, and I nodded, promising nothing but hoping for something. We rolled out, sirens off, lights dim, the city sprawling around us like a graveyard waking up. Smoke hung thicker now, curling from unseen fires. The streets were a mess, cars abandoned mid-turn, glass glittering under our tires. And those things, they were everywhere, wandering, watching. We had 4 hours left in those first 12, and I knew then, this wasn't ending anytime soon. The station might have been our sanctuary, but out here, we were the last line between hope and hell. The city was a beast unchained by the time we rolled out of the station again, tires crunching over debris in the fading light. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the low growl of the engine cutting through a silence that felt alive, predatory. Jake drove, knuckles white on the wheel, while Nadia rode shotgun, her flashlight sweeping the road ahead. I sat in the back with our gear, the weight of my fire axe resting across my knees, its cold metal a strange comfort. We'd promised Carl we'd check his son's apartment 2 miles east, a simple detour before circling back with any survivors we could snatch from this nightmare. Simple, sure, until you factored in the infected roaming every shadow. The streets were a graveyard of normal life. Cars sat abandoned, some with doors flung wide, others smashed into poles or each other like the drivers had bolted mid-panic. Smoke twisted upward in thick spirals, painting the sky a sickly orange. Fires no one was left to fight. We passed a warehouse with scorch marks clawing up its side, windows blown out, and inside, vague shapes shuffled through the gloom. No cops, no ambulances, no flashing lights. Just us, a lone engine creeping through a world that didn't make sense anymore. Carl's son lived in a low-rise apartment block, a squat brick building that loomed dark and quiet as we pulled up a block away. The front door hung ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze, and the windows stared down like empty eyes. We killed the engine, grabbed our tools, Halligan bars, extinguishers, med kits, and slipped out, boots soft on the pavement. Fire department. I called, voice low but firm. Anyone here, come to us, we'll get you out. Silence answered, thick and heavy, until a faint scrape echoed from inside, like nails dragging on wood. My pulse kicked up a notch. We edged into the lobby, flashlights carving paths through the dark. The air smelled of mildew and something sharper, metallic, blood, maybe, or fear. Nadia took point, her beam catching on a smear of red across the tiled floor. Over here, she whispered, nodding toward a side hallway. Sprawled there was a woman in faded pajamas, her chest rising shallowly, eyes half open and glassy. She looked lost, dazed, like she'd been running on fumes for hours. I knelt beside her, keeping my voice steady. "Ma'am, can you hear me? We're here to help." She blinked slow, lips quivering, then rasped, "They're everywhere." Her gaze flicked to me, pure terror flooding in. Banging all night. Nadia crouched, slipping an arm under her shoulders. "We've got you. Let's move." But the woman resisted, thrashing weakly, like she thought we were the threat. "No, no. They'll hear," she hissed, clawing at Nadia's jacket. I traded a look with Jake. Time was slipping away. "We'll be quiet," I promised, not sure if I believed it myself. Then Jake's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Heads up, we've got company." Four infected shuffled into the lobby from the far end, their heads snapping toward us like we'd flipped a switch. One wore a dark coat, tall and lanky, moving with a fast, uneven limp that ate up the distance too quick. The others followed, their blank stares glinting in our flashlight beams. No words, no cries, just that relentless shuffle, drawn by our voices or the woman's faint whimpers. "Get her up," I snapped, stepping between them and Nadia. She hoisted the woman, half carrying her toward the exit, while Jake and I planted ourselves as a wall, tools raised. I gripped my Halligan bar, its weight steadying my shaking hands. "Back off," I shouted, more for us than them. They didn't flinch, didn't blink. The tall one lunged, arms swinging wild, and I shoved it back with the bar, metal clanging against bone. It stumbled but didn't stop, just reset and came again, like a machine stuck on repeat. Jake swung his axe in a wide arc, not to hit, just to warn, but they pressed closer, a low moan rasping from one's throat, hollow and chilling. My stomach lurched. These weren't people anymore, not really. We sidestepped, herding Nadia and the woman toward the door, a slow retreat that felt like wading through mud. Their hands swiped at us, fingers brushing my sleeve, and I yanked away, heart pounding. "Go, go," Jake yelled, and we broke for it, spilling into the street. The infected followed, spilling out behind us, their moans echoing off the brick. We hustled to the engine, piling the woman in first. She clung to Nadia, trembling, then slammed the doors as those pale hands smacked the glass, smearing it with grime. Jake gunned the engine, and we peeled out, the thumps fading as distance swallowed them. Back at the station, we handed the woman off to the triage corner, now a cluster of shaken survivors, bandaged and hollow-eyed. She didn't know Carl's son, couldn't say if he'd made it. I caught Carl's hopeful stare across the room and shook my head, hating the way his face fell. We'd try again, maybe, but the clock was ticking, 8 hours in, and the city was a furnace of fear. Smoke columns rose in the distance, thicker now, and muffled screams carried on the wind. Radio broadcasts droned on, sporadic but clear, "Stay inside." Roads blocked, infected drawn to sound. Every word tightened the knot in my chest. The next 4 hours were a blur of desperate runs. We'd roll out, silent as ghosts, scavenging for survivors. A family barricaded in a duplex, an old man hiding in a shed, a teen who'd locked herself in a car. Each trip brought more heartbreak, doors we couldn't open, cries we couldn't reach. Once, we spotted a convoy of cars inching out of town, horns blaring, only to draw a swarm of infected that overwhelmed them. People abandoned their wheels, running blind, and we couldn't stop, couldn't save them all. The math didn't add up. One engine, 3 of us, against a city unraveling. By hour 11, exhaustion clawed at me, my gear heavier with every step. We'd turned the station into a stronghold, doors reinforced, windows boarded, survivors packed inside like sardines. Outside, the infected roamed in loose packs, drawn by stray noises. A car alarm, a distant gunshot. Inside, we rationed what little we had. Bandages, water, hope. Jake kept checking his phone, screen blank. Nadia stared out a window, silent. Marcus muttered about a friend at the hospital, unreachable. Me? I climbed to the roof with Torres, needing air, needing something to anchor me. The city stretched out below, a patchwork of shadow and flame. Orange glows pulsed on the horizon, fires raging unchecked. Flashlights winked here and there, maybe survivors, maybe traps. Sirens still keened, faint and scattered, proof others were out there fighting too. Torres leaned on the ledge, his face carved from stone. "We signed up for this, Sam," he said, voice rough. "Not this exactly, but close enough. We keep going." I nodded, throat tight. He was right. It's what we did, who we were. Protect, save, endure. When the 12th hour hit, no cavalry rode in, no cure dropped from the sky. The station stood firm, a flickering light in a sea of dark. A dozen more souls inside than when we'd started, scraped from the jaws of chaos. Supplies dwindled, fatigue sank deep, and the truth settled heavier than my gear. This was just the start. I'd learned something in those 12 hours, though. Heroism isn't always the big save, the burning building run. Sometimes it's holding a door, keeping your cool when a kid's crying in your arms, or pushing out into the night because someone might still be out there. I'm telling you this, my story, so you know you're not alone. I'm still here, with Jake, Nadia, Torres, the whole damn crew, doing what we can. The city's a shadowland, infected prowling every street, but hope's not dead. It's in the station's walls, in the faces we've pulled to safety, in the next run we'll make when the sun comes up. If you're hearing this, find a stronghold, lock it down, hold tight. Help's slow, but it's coming, I swear it. We're firefighters, we don't quit. Darkness can't kill that. So yeah, that's how I made it through the first 12 hours, and I'll damn well make it through the next. If you see an engine rolling quiet through the streets, no lights, no noise, that's us, hunting for the next life to save. Stay safe, stay tough, and don't give up. If this tale gave you a shiver, hit that like button, subscribe for more. I'll keep the creepy coming. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your doors barred.